Our featured guest tonight is a legend of the film, television, and recording industries, and his accomplishments have seen his life and career enshrined with the 2,777th star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You likely already know most of his songs, themes, and scores by heart, and they continue to leave indelible marks on pop culture. Here to chat about his incredible life, career, and brand new documentary, Killing Me Softly with His Songs, is none other than composer Charles Fox. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here with you, David.
So you've had one of the more storied careers I could ever imagine, but I honestly think some of the equally interesting parts of your story is how it all began. So I'd kind of like to start at the beginning, if I may. If I understand the story correctly, your father was a Jewish immigrant to the Bronx from Poland, right? And what was his story as he recounted it to you? How did he first arrive in America?
Oh my, he has quite an interesting story. I would say, first of all, I would also say my mother was born in Israel, and they met in the Bronx. My mother came here as a young girl with her mother and three siblings. My father came, well, actually, he was in the Polish army fighting the Russians. He didn't know that it was World War One. He only knew that it was fighting the Russians. He was taken prisoner, escaped, and made his way back to his little town, little shtetl, as they called it. And when they came to bring him back into the army, his mother said, "Run, run." So he was 15 years old, and he ran. He left. He stowed away on a ship to Haifa in Israel. He jumped ship because he had no passport, swam to the shore, started a little life in Israel, and spent a couple of years there before he made his way to America. So that was his story, you know. So I would tell you this: my father was a mandolin player. He just used to carry his mandolin with him no matter where he went. He bought the mandolin from a man walking down the street who had a mandolin in a paper bag. And my father asked him, "What is that?" And he said, "A mandolin." He said, "You want to sell it?" And he bought it. My father became a mandolin player. So that was my beginning of music. Listen to my father playing the mandolin.
I was going to ask you that. And then I know that after that, you went to the High School of Music and Art.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that wasn't by happenstance either.
No. Then I started taking piano lessons when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And Music and Art was a fantastic school of the arts. It merged later with a school called Performing Arts. I had auditioned for both, but Performing Arts was more about performing and dancing and singers and theater people. Music and Art was more about the fine arts and composition. The two eventually merged, became the LaGuardia High School of the Arts, which is the premier arts school in the country. I go back there and I give some classes from time to time and meet with the students. And that was a great pathway for me because suddenly I wasn't the only guy in the block who took piano lessons seriously. You know, my friends went up to play basketball. I did that too. I played baseball. But I did a lot of practicing the piano. So when I went to Music and Art, there were other students who really were very involved in their instruments. I found I love jazz. I didn't know about that. And I started listening to classical concerts. And I started going to the opera. I had an orchestration teacher in high school who said, if you want to learn how to write for instruments, go watch them closely. See how they play, see where the arco and the violins, and see the embouchure of the trumpets, and when they play high notes, and make a mental note of combinations of a flute and a clarinet, or two flutes and a clarinet, and remember those things. So I started going to the Metropolitan Opera. If I got there early enough, there was a standing room around the whole back section, the whole orchestra. And if I got there early enough, I could stand right behind the double basses and watch. And so I did that, and I got to be in love with opera, you know. Things led one thing to the other. And the one thing I never thought of doing in my life was becoming a songwriter, oddly enough. I love music. I love composition. I love Latin music and those songs. I love jazz, but pop songs on the radio had no interest to me for a long while until I worked with Bob Crew, and we were doing a movie together. Barbarella was my second film, and Bob said that Bob was a great songwriter. He wrote the songs for the Jersey Boys. For the Four Seasons, were turned into the show, the Jersey Boys. And he wrote the lyrics anyway. And when he got the job to do Barbarella, he was a songwriter, and he asked me to do the score. So it was a great opportunity for me. And he said, we need about 5 or 6 songs in the film. You and I write the songs. So just like that, I became a songwriter. Never even occurred to me before.
I believe it was in your high school years where you were first introduced to Latin music, which I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like it would go on to be kind of ever present in your life. If you could please set the stage for us. I understand there's a story, a scene for us stumbling into a Randy Carlos show for the first time. What's the story there?
So when I was 15 years old, I had a band. And we played in the Catskill Mountains, a very popular resort area in the summer in New York at that time. So one day, into this hotel that we played, 2 fellows came who had been in the same hotel, and now we're playing at the Nemerson Hotel, which is one of the bigger hotels, with a band called Randy Carlos, and they invited us down to see the band. I didn't know anything about Latin music, but we went, and here was this big dance floor with his band, Randy Carlos, who was very suave with his guitar and 2 trumpets, and the Latin music got to me. It hit me like a sledgehammer. I said, I love this. The beat, you know, and the dancers on the floor, the girls were gorgeous, and the women, the guys were cool. And I said, I want to do that. I want to do that, Latin music. So I then devoted myself to Latin music. And when I came back to school, I started buying all the records I could afford to buy. I also studied jazz piano with Lenny Tristano, who was one of the jazz greats. I spent the year with Lenny, but all this was happening. This a very kind of a fireworks time in my life. All these things were emerging interest, you know, between the opera and classical concerts, seeing Leonard Bernstein perform, conduct the New York Philharmonic from the highest seat in the highest balcony at Carnegie Hall was tremendously impressive. And then the Latin music and the jazz, and it was a very wonderful time in my life. So I got into Latin music. I started playing the piano and got to play Latin bands. Then when I was 18 years old, I went to Paris. And I went to study with the extraordinary teacher, Nadia Boulanger. And she was a teacher of Aaron Copland 40 years before me. And generations of composers came to Paris to study with her, including Quincy Jones, who we just lost a few weeks ago. And whenever almost until the day he passed, whenever I see Quincy, we talk about Boulanger, how he was as important to her. She was important to him as she was to me.
You know, here you mentioned when you went to Paris, and I'm thinking you're there about to graduate high school. You're thinking about your future. And I believe it was one of your teachers who kind of played a pivotal role in how essentially a Jew from the Bronx found himself in Paris, France, sitting under one of the greatest musicians and composers of her era. How did that come about? Can you give us a connection of how you ended up in Paris, France?
I certainly can. So there was a teacher named Morris Lorna. I knew him as Mark Lorna, and he was the composition teacher in the school. And in order to get to his class, you had to pre-take a course in orchestration. So I then took composition. And to me, it was an incredible experience learning what goes into music. I mean, I'd play the piano, I'd hear it, I enjoy the music. I didn't know what went into it. I didn't know about structure. I didn't know about the elements in music, you know, counterpoint and harmony. I just played it at the piano and all sounded great, including jazz. And I love the rhythms and the feeling. Going to this class with Mark Lerner, it was like learning how to build a bridge. You know, if you start on one side and the other side, how do you meet in the middle? Do you meet or you do not quite meet? It was suddenly breaking it down. What is it? What are the elements in music? And that was a turn on to me. And the very first piece I had performed in the school, I was so immodest about it. I had a little piece for clarinet and piano, but I was in the audience in what they had called the semi-annual concert, a big concert hall that was a school. And when my piece went on, I turned around to everyone and said, "That's me. That's me. That was my piece." So I was so excited about it.